Welcome back, Hoopheads, to the Uninsured Ankles podcast. I am not your regular host. That is Nick Swanson. He's pulling a Joel Embiid on us tonight. I am Josh Barton, and joining me tonight are Jordan Stratton and Haley Everett. Guys, how we feeling tonight?
We're feeling good. Feeling saturated with basketball.
I'm feeling less good. The Hawks have lost two straight, and I can only be optimistic about one thing, and that's Australian Derek White or Australian Drew Holiday, whichever your flavor you prefer. But yeah, otherwise it's been a rough little stretch for us.
Well, thankful for me, I have both flavors on my team, so we're just enjoying the whole Neapolitan mix-up in Boston. All right, fellas. So we're about 10, 12 games into the season, depending on the team. And we have two very notable storylines that we need to address. And in Nick's honor, we are going to hit you with our hottest or our spiciest take. And being the negative Nancy's that we are, we're going to start with the worst team, and that is the Milwaukee Bucks. Milwaukee Bucks, champions not that long ago. They have a guy named Giannis who's pretty good at the game of basketball. They also have a guy in Chris Middleton who had surgery on both ankles this past offseason. If you're keeping score at home, you have two ankles. So having surgery on both of them is not a good thing. Their head coach is also Doc Rivers, and his lead assistant is Darvin Ham. And I'm sure, as Jordan would tell you, the Darvin Ham experience is not for the faint of heart.
Salute.
Do you have your hands in your pockets right now, Jordan?
Look, I can't say that I'm sad that he's gone. That's all I'll say about it.
Well, fair enough. So, on the topic, my Boston Celtics defeated the Milwaukee Bucks this evening, to bring the Bucks to a record of 2-8, 14th in the Eastern Conference. Their two wins are against the lowly Utah Jazz, who are very clearly going for Cooper Flag, and against the zombies that are known as the Philadelphia 76ers. Guys, what's going on in Milwaukee? I'll start first. The Bucks are going to make the Eastern Conference Finals, believe it or not, without making a single change. How's that for spice?
Wow.
I I, I don't hate it. I was trying to dive into some of what's happening with them, and a lot of it is on the offensive end. Their defense isn't any better or worse than it was last year, and that's not surprising to me, given that they didn't necessarily improve greatly on that end. Um, but their offense has been pretty rough. Um, I think in large part it's due to some inefficiency with Dame's not been like top of his game every night, but it's not like you can still see the spark. Like he's had a few of those nights where you're like, all right, Dame still got it. But Gary
And they
Trent
still
Jr.
lost.
I mean, yeah, but they had two one possession games against the undefeated Cleveland Cavaliers, and their other like they've had a decently tough schedule other than the terrible Jazz and Sixers teams that they played. But Gary Trent Jr. and Brook Lopez have been atrocious to start the year. Like I think they're both under 30%, like pretty substantially under 30% from three, and that's really their calling cards on offense. And that's what made Brook so elite on that end is that he was stretching the floor to 27, 28 feet, and you had to guard him out there. And right now he's just not. He had an okay day today, I think, if I remember correctly. He went like 3 for 6 or something from three, but it's been few and far between for him. And Gary Trent got moved to the bench, and I know he's out with injury now, but still, it's not what they expected. They thought they were getting a 3-and-D guy. They thought I think everybody expected Gary Trent to be elevated Malik Beasley, and he's been not that. He's been very much not that. So, anyways, I know that's a really hot take. I still think that they can get to the playoffs, but the the body language doctors need to
Mm.
check in on them too because
Ooh.
they got some bad vibes going on in Milwaukee right now.
Yeah, the bad vibes came through the screen very evidently today. They controlled the first half against the Celtics today, pretty handedly, and then the second half, everything just kind of unraveled, and you can kind of feel the iciness between, namely Dame and Giannis, which is really weird. But here's the rationale for them making the conference finals. Uh, Best player in the conference. Probably by far, Joel makes a case for it, but Joel is the most injury prone star other than Kawhi in the league. And he hasn't played a game this season. The Sixers are a mess. They're somehow worse than the Bucks, and we're not even talking about them. That's how bad it is. We've just all given up, apparently. But they have the best player, and the East is not that good. And outside of Boston, maybe New York, there's not really a team that can guard Giannis. And as you just mentioned, Dame does stuff that only really Steph Curry does. He had a shot this afternoon where the shot clock's running down. It was a wild pass, and it was a wrong-footed runner from three that he just swished like it was nothing. Uh, and when you mix that together, their floor is second round, and then it's just a couple bounces to get to the conference finals. The other thing I'll just add real quick is Doc is finally playing some of the young guys. Andre Jackson can't shoot, but he is super athletic. And AJ Green got some minutes today, and he was looking like Sam Hauser, but Sam Hauser wasn't making shots for us, so that was tough. But yeah, AJ Green was making shots, and if he can give them spacing, I'm still a fan of Gary Trent Jr. I think the Bucks can make the conference finals without making any changes, which I think is the important part because they don't have anything to trade. Jordan, how about you?
I don't know. I think I agree with you guys that they have that as a potential ceiling. The concern is obviously the lack of chemistry. We've seen plenty of really talented teams get knocked out
Mhm.
early just because they couldn't play together. And even with somebody like Bobby Portis and Pat Connaughton, who we expect to mesh with everybody, have looked out of sorts. Not, I mean, and they'll still put up some numbers, but they just haven't. There's been no flow to anything that they've done on either side of the ball, which it's very strange to watch. So many times it's a dead ball where it's a turnover or even just like a timeout is called and you see the looks that go between the players and it's just confusion. And that's a tough place to be. And honestly, it reminds me a lot of where the Lakers were at this point of the season last year, and maybe even the year before that. And they've commented on that in hindsight about a lack of identity on that Lakers team the last couple of years. And I don't think it's any sort of coincidence that we see that when the coaching change happened the way that it did. When you have a coach that players said that there was a lack of identity, and then the coach moves over to a new team, and we see instantly a lack of identity from that team, I think we have to go straight back to the coaches.
Yeah, I agree. The my hot take on them was related to this, and that was that, and this isn't, I don't think that hot of a take, but that they fire Doc
Mm.
before moving either Dame or Giannis. And I don't think that's like a sizzling take, but I, I do think that just from you hear a lot of the things that are a lot of the issues, and it seems like it goes back to just not having the right fit for the players. Because and other than the fact that, Giannis and Dame's fit sounds a lot better than it actually is, because Dame's great in a pick and roll, and Giannis isn't necessarily the best as a screener. But
Mm.
setting that aside, if you have good leadership to kind of facilitate some of these things and get people operating in ways that are going to create more effectiveness in pairings or in lineup, like in their lineups, in their most important lineups, which are going to be Dame and Giannis centric. Like, I don't know, it just seems like Doc's not the guy for them. And he doesn't come off as the type of guy who would mesh well with Dame at least. And I don't really know about Giannis, but like Budenholzer and Doc feel like very different types of coaches. And
Yeah.
Budenholzer had such good success there. And I think you need a guy who's a little more X's and O's and let Giannis and Dame be the leaders that they are. Like Giannis is a great lead by example guy, and Dame's been by and far like one of the most like people loved playing with him in Portland. Everything that came out of Portland was like Dame's the best on and off the floor, and that's it. And like I know he had a lot of personal stuff last year, but I don't know. I'm also like a Dame truther, so a little bit of bias in that opinion. But
A
yeah,
follow-up
Yeah.
question to you there is how many coaches will the Bucks have on their payroll by the time they're done firing and hiring a million new coaches? Are we does because does is Budenholzer still getting paid by them? I think he is.
Yeah, I think you're right.
um,
Because maybe that's a good
His
question.
contract might have expired this last season, but there's a chance that they've got three coaching staffs on their payroll right now. And
Yeah.
I agree with you, Haley, that I think they're well on their way to picking up a fourth pay on their payroll. And if Budenholzer's contract isn't still on their payroll, then they would just be picking up a third, which is insane.
Yeah, I think because of the way that the contracts work, Budenholzer is not on their payroll because he's been well,
Ah,
depends on what his contract is. His contract, if it's lesser than what it was for the Bucks, then they
They're
pay
paying the
the
difference.
yeah. But if it's more than
yeah.
what it was for the Bucks with the Suns, but yeah,
They've essentially picked up his contract,
mhm.
which checks
Yeah.
out.
Yeah,
Still,
I'm glad you mentioned the coaching piece of it because there's an interesting trend across the league of the most successful coaches. So, we talked last time a lot about JJ Redick, and like the change in the offense that he's created with the Lakers. Joe Mazzulla, and a couple weeks ago, everyone was freaking out about Mazzulla ball and it ruining the NBA. You have Taylor Jenkins in Memphis. Most of these young coaches, Jason Kidd, who's not the youngest coach, but he's still on the younger end. And outside of Bud, it's all young, innovative coach, Bud and Rick Carlisle, who's still somehow going despite being a coach since I'm pretty sure I was in diapers. But the trend across the league is for younger, innovative coaches. And for the Bucks to hire Doc after firing Adrian Griffin was just kind of a weird move to start with. He's never really been an offensive innovator. He's never been a defensive innovator. He just had good players. Like if you look at his track record, he coached Tracy McGrady in Orlando, and then he goes to Boston, and we were terrible for years. But then he got KG and Ray Allen to go with Pierce. Then he goes to the Clippers with Chris Paul and all those guys. Like he's never really like coached in a way. He's just kind of existed. And for them to hire him is a weird move. And then two, Terry Stotts, who was Dame's longtime coach in Portland, was on the staff to start the year last year. And then he had a weird dispute with Adrian Griffin and left before either right at the end of training camp or right before games started. And like the coaching staff not being in the most like vibes way possible is not the best thing, for a team if the coaching staff doesn't have it together.
And it's also just a shame that when imagine being Adrian Griffin and going out and winning. I think he
They
was
were 30 and
30 and
13.
13. So
Yeah,
you
30 and
won you
13.
won 70% of your games, and somehow that gets you fired. That's just ridiculous.
Yeah.
I don't even know where to start with that. Like, what did they expect? What do they want? I remember that there was some locker room drama at the beginning of the year, but like there's locker room drama in most locker rooms at some point of some year. So if we're going to say that he got fired just because there was a week where some folks didn't get along, feels absurd because there's always going to be stretches where folks don't get along. And yeah, it it's just it's disappointing because I was listening to somebody, I don't even remember who it was, but we were talking about they were actually talking about coaches in the NFL and using coaches as just like a prop and a turnstile, and that it does such a disservice to your team in the long run. And I don't know, it's just disappointing and feels like the wrong move to make as an owner, as a GM, to just turnstile coaches, especially when you've got ones that have historically been winning coaches like Budenholzer was, not hanging on to those guys and giving them a chance to, regain their footing. Just especially championship winning coaches. You
He was
you gave
years removed from a title.
right, and then you're giving Doc a shot who hasn't done anything. He waltzed.
Won one title.
He won one title on the coattails of one of the first of the big three era that just no one had an answer for, and then couldn't do anything after that, and has the worst Game 7 record of any coach in NBA history, and it never elevates his players to new levels. It just makes no sense. Tell me, tell me where your logic was, Mr. GM, Mr. Owner. Uh, it's disappointing. And that leads me to my take, which is that I think Dame and Giannis will be out at the end of the season if they don't make an Eastern Conference final.
Woo.
I think the discussion has been happening a lot behind the scenes. The rumor mill's been churning for Giannis for
Mm.
like what, pretty much since they won the title.
Well, he's been
And
churning the rumor mill himself.
right. I mean, he's talked about, you know, being interested in playing with different players. There's enough credible sources talking about places that he's mentioned he might like to play that I don't even know if that's a particularly hot take, but I think if he goes, and I think we'll be able to tell as the season goes on if the writing will be on the wall whether or not that's what he's planning to do. And if he does plan to do that, we'll either see the Bucks trade him before he has a chance to leave, uh, or I think they'll trade Dame and just do a full blow up.
Yeah.
Um, so I wouldn't be surprised if they don't make some serious progress and make a Western or an Eastern Conference Finals or even make a finals. I think that they completely blow it up.
Yeah. I will ask you this, and I'll put in my 2 cents first, but then ask you this. Do you have any trade proposals for either Giannis or Dame? Noting the fact that Dame this year is making $48 million, next year is making $54 million, and the year after is making $58 million for a team that I believe they're in they're close to the second apron, but they're not over it. And messing around on the trade machine, there is very little flexibility they have.
Yeah,
Thoughts there?
there's definitely you definitely would have some serious work cut out for you on the trade machine. Um, I think mm, I think more likely is we see something happen before Giannis has the chance to leave on his own, and we see a trade for I could see somebody like in OKC trading three or four of their stockpiled first round picks and maybe even someone like a Chet
Mm.
if they really wanted to go for it and take advantage of Giannis's prime while he's still got three or four I mean, as long as he stays healthy, you've got at least 3 or 4 guaranteed prime years from Giannis. I mean, but they've also got a a stable of young guys that they could
Mm,
pick and choose 2 or 3 of and lump those in with 3 or 4 firsts and make a really appealing case for the Bucks to make a trade. And if OKC doesn't make that kind of trade with the Bucks, they're gonna make it with somebody. I don't see
hmm
any future that the OKC doesn't make a trade like that for a star with somebody in the next 12 months
hmm Yeah.
because they just have too many resources and such a good team already to not go in and utilize the prime of SGA and another star. Anyway, that's a completely side tangent. I think that would be a good fit. Um, you'd be hard pressed to not find teams that would be willing to shell out for Giannis. The cap for Dame is tough and definitely need some time with the trade machine before I'd be even able to put apples to apples for what
Yeah.
wouldn't even make sense.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the aging star with a increasing salary cap is or an increasing value on the cap is tough. But I do have a trade that does work.
Woo!
Capella and DeAndre Hunter and all of the first round picks from Atlanta to Milwaukee for Giannis Antetokounmpo, and we bring him to the A. It'd be amazing. He'd fit great next to Trey. Trey doesn't necessarily have to run pick and rolls with him to be effective with him because he can run the pick part with whoever.
With
It doesn't matter who it
Johnson.
is. Yeah, it can be
Yeah.
Jalen, and then Giannis can hang out in the dunker spot or be the guy running off 45s from the
Yeah,
wing and like, oh gosh,
just
it'd be
run that
Haley,
gunner
I- I'm
spot
I'm a
like
I'm a burst your
2010 Bron.
shut
bubble
up,
pretty
stop
quickly.
it.
There is no chance that trade happens without Jalen Johnson in the
Uh,
trade. There is no
yeah,
chance.
and he doesn't fit because of the way or at least this year he doesn't fit. They'd have
His
to wait.
contract.
Yeah, he's
Yeah.
got the poison pill provision.
Yeah.
Anyways, yeah. So there's not.
Well,
It's a difficult market with the new CBA. And
yeah.
anyways,
Yeah. Tough start to the season for the Bucks. But also it's 10 games. It's a bad 10 game stretch. If this is a bad 10 game stretch in January, we're slightly concerned, but we're more or less brushing it under the table. I'm not overly concerned. Giannis does have a little bit of a increasing injury history, especially come playoff time. That makes me a little uneasy, but he's still the best player in the conference. I think they'll be fine. The surprise of the early NBA season is the undefeated, last of the undefeateds, Cleveland Cavaliers, the fighting Cavs of Cleveland. They are off to 11-0 start with a pretty impressive destruction of the Golden State Warriors the other day. They've basically brought back all the same guys and just I have a new coach. So I'll ask you, Haley, are you feeling the Atkinson diet?
oh yeah. I've always been a big fan of Kenny. I'm glad to see him uh I should say take a head coaching job. It's not like he hasn't been offered them. He actually, if y'all
Yes.
remember, took the Charlotte job and then decided to turn it down, which is
Pause.
crazy.
That's
Yeah.
insane.
So anyways, excited, and you can see his impact in the way that they play. So just rattling off a few things from year over year. Cavs offensive rating is first in the league right now. Last year was 16th. Cavs defensive rating this year's 8th. Last year it was 7th. So their defensive rating hadn't slid much. So they're still really good on that end. Obviously their offense has increased, and then their net rating is second in the league behind OKC. They're first in field goal percentage, first in effective field goal percentage, and first in 3-point percentage. They don't shoot like an overwhelming amount of threes. I think they're about league average. So
Mhm.
for all of those guys who are like hating on the NBA now because there's too many threes, there's only some threes with the Cleveland Cavaliers. But they are 11th in pace this year, and they were
Mhm.
24th last year. And for anybody who watched the Cavs in the last couple years under Bickerstaff, it was a slugfest anytime you watched them. It's not
Mhm.
that it was necessarily difficult to watch, but it was just
It was
less
difficult to
ex
watch.
yeah, it was
Say it.
difficult to watch. Let's just be yeah, it was not it wasn't the team I was going to put on League Pass when the Hawks weren't
Mhm.
playing. Like I didn't enjoy watching them. And then in addition to their pace, they play a ton of different lineups. Like
Mhm.
they're like running like 1 through 12 most nights. And I remember I said in our Over Under podcast that their bench wasn't that was going to be their downfall. And their bench has shown up. Strus has been out. Dean Wade just got hurt a few nights ago. Okoro, Caris, Minivan, Georges Niang, Sam Merrill, Ty Jerome's like one of the league's best backup point guards right now, which is not what I anticipated for his career trajectory.
He
Uh,
iced the game last night against they were playing Brooklyn, weren't they? He had a
Yeah.
go or
yeah,
they were up one. Yeah, they were up one with like 30 seconds left, and with Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell on the floor, they put it in Jerome's hands and said clear out, and he went and got a bucket. It was one of the strangest end of game scenarios that I've ever seen. I've never seen a like fourth or fifth option on the team be the guy that they just hand it to on a clear out. That's something you see like in college when you see like when a bench guy gets hot or something like that.
yeah,
This is the NBA we're talking about. Donovan
He's on that
Mitchell.
Don he's on that Dante DiVincenzo trajectory. He spent a year in Golden State as a bench player and then goes to another team and is like, "Cool, let me cook, guys. I've got this."
yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah, my last note, sorry, I was deep in my bag on looking into kind of their different just their like overall profile. They have they have two lineups that are net negative and they're like barely 1 point. All of their other lineups are their plus minuses in the positive. And again, they had I think 66 different five-man lineups and hardly any of them play a lot of minutes together. I don't think any of their lineups average more than 10 minutes in a game together, which is not usual for a team with an 11-0 record. You know, continuity is like the thing that we always talk about, especially in the NBA. It's like, you know, people are fighting through injuries, but the folks who get to play together the most, they end up building a lot of chemistry and whatnot. And it's like you're seeing guys who are just next man up mentality and like dudes just like Ty Jerome steps up, ices a game one game. Okoro went insane against Golden State. Like he was didn't miss the whole team like didn't miss a three. It was ridiculous. They
They
shot like
only
75% from three that game.
they only needed 12 points out of their star player in a game against another top team in the NBA right now
Mhm.
to win by 25, but they were up by 40 at
50.
At
halftime.
Yeah.
100.
Yeah.
Almost doubled those boys up.
All right, and
Yeah.
my sorry, I know I'm running on and on. My hot take for all of this is they get no end of season accolades. No coach of the
Mm.
year, no all NBAs, no all defense. I think that this is one of those situations where we see like the lack of power in so many numbers. Like
Mm.
everybody's improved, and yeah, I do think Kenny sh will be in the discussion, but I think because there is no one player who's like by and like far and away the distinguishing factor for them. Not to say that there hadn't been leaps. Like so many guys have made leaps. Garland's made leaps, Mobley's made leaps, Mitchell's been who he's been. Allen continues to do the stuff that he started showing off last year, but it's hard to elevate them over other people for some of the end of season awards. So that's my hot take.
I'll push
Yeah.
back a little on you there just because I think if they continue this trajectory and they finish as a two seed in the East, and I say continue this trajectory and finish as a two seed because it's a foregone conclusion that the Celtics will be the one seed. Uh,
Absolutely.
I think Donovan will get a nod to like the All NBA third team because
Mm.
I just think they're because that's picked by executives and there's like a
Mhm.
handful of people that get a vote,
Picked by
right?
media.
It's
It's just
all
media.
media. Oh, that's
Just
boring.
media.
I
It's
thought
100 media members that's randomly picked by the NBA.
I thought the execs also got sway in that, but if it's all media, you might be right. Uh, the one thing though is that we see those top seeded teams, usually their number one option will get a nod, even if you could make a really good argument for somebody on a mediocre team being in on the All NBA team. Um, so I think he gets himself a third or a second team, just depending on how things shake out. Um, but I have to agree with you. I think the leap that we've seen them take this year, yes, you got to attribute some of it to coaching. I think really a big thing is that their core is healthy. I
Hmm.
coming into last year, I was super high on the Cavs. I don't know if you guys remember how much I was hyping up their core four coming into the beginning of the season. But really they're five guys of Garland, Mitchell, LeVert, Mobley,
Mm.
and Allen. That's one of the best fives that you can put on a court of any team. But they at different points during the year last year, I don't know if they ever had all five of those guys healthy for a longer stretch than 10 or 15 games. Garland had some injuries and he was getting over having broken his jaw,
Yeah.
which I mean, I can't even imagine doing and having an injury like that you're still recovering from and then trying to go out and play a physical sport like basketball. I would just
Hmm.
be scared all the time. Because I can't imagine how terrible the recovery from something like that is. And then you're just going to play scared. And I think we saw that from Garland last year. You
Yeah.
saw a big step backwards from his breakout year the previous year. And I think we can pretty much exclusively attribute that to him recovering from his injury. And then you had Mitchell out for stretches, you had LeVert out for stretches, you had Allen out for stretches. I I think even towards the
But
back half of the season, Mobley was out for like 10 or
Hmm.
yeah, Mobley
15
was out
games
for a little
too.
while.
Like they never had health of their best five players. And so coming into the season, I I think a, a lot of people, including myself, overlooked the fact that they were healthy. I was super
Hmm.
high on them last year and then, kind of just like forgot about them as they slid down the standings a little bit. And now that they're back healthy and Garland is 100% healed and so playing with more explosiveness, and they're getting help from their bench that they didn't have before either, which is a big note. I think my hot take is that Garland and Mitchell are a top three backcourt in the NBA,
Mm.
and I don't think they're number three.
Names or it didn't happen.
I
Yep.
think I think I'm gonna have to give Kyrie and Luca the top
Hmm.
spot.
Thank you.
I think we have to. Um, and then I think it depends on if you let me count Jalen Williams as a shooting guard. Then I might run SGA and Jalen Williams as my second. If you don't allow it, then I'm going to probably take Mitchell and Garland in that spot.
Who would be number three in that order?
I don't know who would be my third if you don't let me take Jalen Williams and SGA. All I know is that Mitchell and Garland are probably going to my two spot. I'd have to think about who would come after that. But
Hmm.
moral of the story is they're top three, and it might not be three.
Yeah.
Um, and just a quick back note to what Haley was saying about them having so many lineups is I think that bodes really well for them for the
Hmm.
rest of the season because yeah, yes, like you mentioned, usually it's the teams that have the continuity that do better, but the fact that they don't have the continuity and they're getting the same results means that because they will lock in lineups as the season progresses and as we get closer to playoff time. They're just gonna. Some of these guys that are playing right now are not gonna play as
Mhm.
many minutes. They're gonna figure out
Hey,
what
Merle.
yeah, they're going to figure out what role players they like in what spots the most, and those guys are going to get locked into their roles. And then I think we're just going to see them even further progress as long as they can stay healthy. And I know that's the caveat for pretty much every team that
Mhm.
health is going to be the be all end all. But the fact that they have so many lineups and are still putting out this result is really impressive.
Yep.
Yeah, well, you mentioned the injury luck so far, but Max Strus hasn't played a game this season. He's arguably their best shooter, and once they get him back, that's just another shooter to go with their creators.
And he's like Kenny Atkin. He's like a Kenny Atkinson type. Like
Yeah,
he's gonna be really fun in Kenny Atkinson's offense.
yeah,
That's gonna be good stuff.
be the Joe Harris role.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Joe Harris was like dang near an all-star with Kenny.
Yeah,
That's crazy to
He
think
hasn't
about.
played since.
that is crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think if we're talking about that Nets team, the thing that we have to acknowledge about those Nets teams is that Kenny Atkinson made D'Angelo Russell an all-star. And I don't know if you've watched D'Angelo Russell lately, but he's been far from an all-star ever since.
Okay, and since we're on the topic, and I know we were well, last we spoke on the Lakers, we were all on the mountaintop
I struck a nerve.
of their amazing start, and I will say that I think there has been some recalling of people's praise for JJ as they have lost a few games in a row. I don't think that's fair, and I think that
Mhm.
honestly the losses have made my opinion of him grow fonder because of how he's responded to them and
Mhm.
because of how he's reacted to D'Angelo Russell. His adjusting of D'Angelo's role to a bench role, I
Mm.
think, was a good move overall. I think that the Lakers need some spark coming off of their bench right now anyway, but also to set the tone of like, look, the what you've been putting out on the court is not what's going to lead to team success here. And they need a better point of attack defender anyway. So inserting Cam Reddish is a move that Haley and I will put our firm stamp of approval on. But that all being said, I think how we saw him respond in media, like I like it. I like to see a coach upset in
Mhm.
at game 9 that they're not achieving the way that they envision because that means he cares. Like most coaches at this point in the season are like, "Yep, we're just working out the kinks, and by the time the playoffs roll around, we're going to be firing on all cylinders." Like he was pissed. He
Doc
stormed out
Rivers.
of a couple of their media sessions,
Yeah.
and yeah. Anyway, so yes, the Lakers have pulled back a little bit, but
Yeah.
that has elevated my little shining light on JJ and done a good job of highlighting some of the comments I made previously around uh, performance of one D'Angelo Russell.
That's
To
enough Lakers talk for today.
to tie that into our original conversation about coaches, I do think that like one of the things that I personally enjoy about some of the new wave of coaches, they have no problem j changing things up.
Mhm.
They're like willing to adapt and they're willing to change people's roles. And I mean, and again, it's not necessarily just the young coaches, like we said, like Kerr moved Kaminga to the bench, and
Yeah.
that's been a large like that's been a positive for the team. And we've seen where D'Angelo's role has changed before and he's responded positively. And, I get it. It's not just like one player, it's about how you can integrate other players into spots that you need them, like you mentioned, Cam needing to be their point of attack um, defender. And then coming back to the Cavs, that's part of like this also helps people fire on all cylinders once they get to the playoffs
Yeah.
because this is what Spoelstra does all year long. He's putting people in position to like quote unquote earn their stripes, take it on the chin in games that do in fact mean something in the long run, but in minutes that mean something so that you can kind of simulate like, all right, what happens when you're in crunch time in a playoff game? Or what
Yeah.
happens when you're in the fourth quarter of a game that is tight against a scrappy team like the Nets, a la Ty Jerome.
I, I
I
was really
Yeah.
I was really disappointed that Ty Lue didn't do that same thing in their game last night
Overrated.
against the Raptors. That uh, I saw a team that just gave James Harden the ball and let him dance for the last 8 minutes of the game, or seven minutes and some change of that game, when they were up by 7 or 8 points, and that feels like, especially at this point of the season, against a team like the Raptors, where you're not particularly worried about one of their players just going off and
Grady Dick would like a word.
uh, look, I do love some Grady Dick in my life, but I'm gonna have to I gotta lean on my they have so many guards on that team that could use some of that additional experience. Just someone like Kevin Porter Jr., who has been out of
No,
the league for a while, and
for good reason.
for great reason. We
I
don't
mean,
need to.
a better example would have been your
Bones
lovely
Highland.
Bones
Bones
Highland.
Island, give
Yeah,
him a man
thank
some
you.
love. What
Jordan's
are we
just like, I
doing?
made this prediction. Please bring back Bones Highland. Ty Lue, are you listening? I need Bones Highland to get
Less
minutes. I have
James Harden,
something
more
riding on
Bones
this.
Island. But
Yeah.
moral of the story is the I mean, even letting Norman Powell run the
Mm,
offense for the fourth quarter, because clearly he has developed into their number two option. It's not even close.
yeah.
So let him handle the reins for a fourth quarter in a close game against a team that you have some confidence against, and let him do his thing. He's shown that he's more than capable over the last 7 or 8 games. He's got the longest stretch of 20-point scoring games in a row for his career. I think he just hit seven last night. So, um, give someone like that the reins for a fourth in a close game and earn his stripes. Anyway, we're a little off topic.
Are there any other teams in Los Angeles you would like to talk about, Jordan, or have we hit them all?
My Angels suck.
And that's for a different podcast.
Yep. So, bringing it back to the Cleveland Cavaliers, to push back a little bit on what Haley said about end of season awards, I would feel like Atkinson is the front runner for Coach of the Year right now. I think he was in the running for possibilities when we did our predictions last pod. We talked a lot about Bud as the newcomer. Talked a lot about JJ more than we planned on. But I think Atkinson fits that mold. The team is almost entirely minus a Ty Jerome, the exact same as last year, and you're just substituting a new coach, and this team is firing all cylinders. My hot take is that this is all nothing and they will end up in the exact same position they were last year and be out in the second round. And here's why. So, despite all the injury, bad luck they had last year, despite JB Bickerstaff, uh, less than sterling coaching job last year, they went 17-2 in the month of January and rocketed up the standings. And what happened? They went out in the second round for I think the second year in a row. And I think come playoff time, the game slows down, the game changes, and your backcourt is 5'11" Darius Garland and 6'1" Donovan Mitchell, who might be allergic to defense. I think we're waiting on the allergy to test to come back, but I've never seen a guy built as a defensive stopper coming into the draft, come in, get the ball. It's like, cool. Now I don't play defense. So I'm skeptical. I also think that Philly and Milwaukee being so bad to start the season and kind of like starting behind the eight ball, they're going to be lower in the standings. Cleveland's going to be really high in the standings, and I think that's really like the worst possible outcome for Cleveland, which they're a fun team to play. I was looking at it trying to poke holes in it aside from, the low hanging fruit of their small backcourt. But, like Haley so eloquently ran through, everything seems sustainable. There's not really any outlier of like this guy shooting 78% from like three, like Buddy Hield is with the Warriors. Although I am a fan of Buddy and believe that is
It's
sustainable.
sustainable. Yeah, yeah. 70% is firmly within his wheelhouse.
There we go, talking about California teams again. Kings are up next for anyone keeping score at home, but I, I have a hard time with that, and I think so. Low hanging fruit, small backcourt. Other low hanging fruit, Mobley and Allen are very duplicative, especially come playoff time. I worry about their spacing. I'm getting a look from Haley, but I just worry about their spacing come playoff time. You match up with a team, like the Celtics, depending on how the bracket shakes out, that's going to space you out and pack the paint. It's going to be tough for them to score come playoff time. Haley, do you have a rebuttal?
I don't think Mobley is as easy to defend against as he was
Mm,
in the past. He's got a
fair.
lot more of like ball in his hands
Mhm.
juice than he's had. And I know that he was billed as like this kind of highly skilled big man who came in with all the defensive intangibles and tangibles, but who could develop into this like offensive kind of like somebody that you could operate an offense through. And this year he's been the second highest per touch guy on the team.
Mm,
So he's between Garland and Mitchell on the team as the guy that they essentially run their offense through. Now, I will say there's some I know there's noise in numbers. It's not like he's possessing the ball for long periods of time, but he is getting involved in the offense a lot, and he isn't just necessarily like a possession starter. He's not just like, hey, we're going to pass you the ball in the high post, you're going to run a handoff. But he's
mhm.
also a possession ender where they're giving him the ball from the 3-point line and he's attacking downhill. And I don't really know what you do with too many guys who are 6'11" and can dribble, but are stronger and longer than the guy you have in front of them. And he can, like, I think he's a good passer for his size. And anyways,
The
I
the
don't
eye
know.
test, the eye test is really good for him.
Yeah. He's
And
kind of like a mini Giannis in a way. I just worry with Allen not being the Brook Lopez spacer that, they're going to have come playoff time.
I wrote down he's baby AD on my
Mm,
notes, and just thinking through about the way JJ's positioned AD this year, it
mm.
feels really similar to the way that they're positioning Mobley. And again, it's the things AD was doing before he was on this little plantar fasciitis issue. Um,
MVP run.
yeah, but Mobley's been really good. Like Mobley's
Yeah.
borderline. Like he has taken a leap in my. He's taken the biggest leap in my mind of all the guys on the Cavs. Um,
Yeah.
and
what
we
I had
yeah.
written down was he's the Paolo Banchero of Nick Claxton's. He's got
I don't know what that one means.
so
Please
so here
explain.
so here's what I would say is has he has a lot of control on offense. And so the way that a comparison I'll make is Paolo Banchero and Zion Williamson. Zion will put his head down, power his way into the paint, and
Mm,
explosively go up and finish. Paolo is gonna get into the paint, make a slow euro, but then use his shoulder to create space and go finish. but he's
Hmm.
very under control and it looks slow, even though it still is very explosive in its own right.
Hmm.
I think that Mobley tends more towards that side of things where he's very fluid in his movements when he's getting into the paint, but still has the explosive punch at the end of it, and then the defensive intangibles and pogo stickiness of Claxton.
His trajectory reminds me a little bit of Jason Tatum, where after his rookie year, we were singing all his praises and people were calling him the next Kevin Garnett. And then he didn't live up to those unreasonable expectations in year two, and then has just slowly progressed. And it's like, hey, guess what? Uh, Evan Mobley's good at the game of basketball. Who would have thought? Also, he's a lock for all defense, Haley. So I hate to pour water on
It was
your
literally a hot take for a reason.
Sorry, I just had to pour some water on it.
I still see an ember. It's burning.
We'll see how the media votes for those guys in Cleveland. Anything else to hit before we move on?
Let her rip.
All right. So, next thing, we are all basketball sickos. We consume an ungodly amount of basketball. We are up, I know Jordan and I are, to all hours of the night watching some of the deepest cut NBA games that you can find. So, gentlemen, League Pass Sleeper, and kind of our working definition of sleeper for those listening are no home team. So that rules out my Boston Celtics, Jordan's Los Angeles Lakers, and Haley's Atlanta Hawks. No Wemby because he's an alien. Although we have a Wemby skeptic in the building, a resident skeptic. Some people don't believe in aliens. And then no top team. So no OKC Thunder, no Boston Celtics. Reading through the list. I'm like, wait, these are top teams. No Knicks, no Dallas, no Denver, no Philly. 15th place, 16th place in the Eastern Conference. I don't know who's watching them anyway. But those are our parameters. So, gentlemen, who is your league pass sleeper?
I'll go first. I put the Charlotte Hornets down as my league pass sleeper. I have long been a not enjoyer of the Charlotte Hornets. I know that people really enjoy LaMelo. I personally find him kind of annoying. But I've
Freaking
really
millennials.
yeah, boomer. Um, no, but this. I've enjoyed watching them play. They got a lot of dudes
Mhm.
who are pretty gritty, and then
Brandon Miller.
you got a lot of style in the way that they play also. LaMelo's been fun. He just does silly stuff. You were talking about
LaMelo is
Dame.
wild.
Yeah, you talking about Dame throwing up the 1 footer. That's like a regular occurrence
It's just
with,
in the bag.
yeah, it's just normal.
Drew Carter literally said that on the broadcast when Dame hit that shot. He's like, LaMelo takes that with 23 seconds on the shot clock.
Yep. But other than that, like one of my favorite players to watch has been Trey Mann. He looks like he had a
Preach.
rough
Mini
go at
Iverson.
it. Yeah, he's like he is the most Allen Iverson like player I have seen since Allen Iverson, and it's so fun to watch. And he's also like he's just a dog. Like he has no
Hmm.
quit. I've seen him try to get back down by like the your power forwards and he just
Hmm.
doesn't move. I'm like, dude, you're like 6'3",
On a good
170
day.
soaking wet. Yeah, and he is like thin and
Yeah.
just like obviously very strong for his size, like maybe pound
Yeah.
for pound one of the strongest dudes in the league, like just ridiculous. And he's just fun to like has that twitchiness with the ball in his
Hmm.
hands. And but yeah, I'm excited for Mark Williams to come back. Really enjoyed
Hmm.
him, and I think that that will help a lot of those guys on at least on the defensive end have a rim, an actual rim protector behind them. But yeah, they've been fun to watch so far, and that's my league pass
Haley,
sleeper.
I've got to ask, what's your appetite on one Grant Williams?
Yeah, I could do without. Like he's got
So could
that's
Boston and Dallas.
he's got to be like he's the on the net rating scale, he's like negative 32 on the net rating scale for league pass teams.
Personality?
Yeah.
Oh,
Just
He's
like
like
I
a
just need to not to be on the court. Like he's unfun to watch.
he's
hmm
like a greasy veggie spring roll. He's always at the buffet. You know it's gonna be there, and you show up anyway. But everybody knows you're not picking that off of your tongs are going elsewhere. You're getting some orange chicken, you're getting some bulgogi. You're not picking the Grant Williams at the
He,
buffet.
he he's like always in their closing lineups too, which is the worst because he's just going to be flailing around
Picking up
trying to.
Oh,
It's just I mean, it's like
gross.
yeah, it's like depressing Joel Embiid, and
I haven't
it's like
even I haven't seen him make a shot this year yet.
mm-mm.
he's actually not
It's
playing
bad.
that bad for them, but he's just not. He's like the
When it's
enjoyability is
bad,
an
it's
all-time
bad.
low. Yeah.
The
And
eye test is
the
so poor.
personality's tough. The best Grant Williams thing, and I can't believe we're spending this much time on Grant Williams, but after the after the preseason last year, Luca is asked what does he think about Grant Williams, and the context was what do you think about Grant Williams as a basketball player because he was their big like offseason addition, and Luca very like coldly said he talks too much, and that dude was traded within 3 months. All right, Jordan, late night West Coast league passes on. Who are you watching?
I am turning on none other than the Brooklyn Nets.
I
And
love it.
for a couple reasons. One, I've been a Claxton enjoyer for
Mm,
much of his young career. He came into the league on those teams with KD when
mhm,
Kyrie was out for long stretches of the season, Harden was out hurt for long stretches. So it was KD and then this hodgepodge
mhm.
ragtag group of rookies and young guys, including but not limited to fellow Pepperdine alum Kessler Edwards, who I got to give a
Shout
shout
out.
out to, who's rocking it on the Mavs this year. Got a little run in their last game, but have been a Claxton fan since then and have watched his game develop a lot, which has been really cool. And another guy that was on those teams was Cam Thomas, who
Mm.
we've seen just become one of the most prolific scorers, like a shrunken version of Michael Porter Jr. With a shot of extra offense,
Who can
and
actually dribble the basketball?
yeah, and is just really fun to watch. He makes so many shots that he has no business making.
None.
He's got to be one of the top three shot makers in the league right now. And he puts up such garbage and it goes in and it's beautiful.
Every time.
So you combine a few really cool shot makers. You've got Schroeder that's gonna get you some buckets. He's fun to watch when he gets in a groove. Cam Johnson can catch fire and do some fun things on both ends of the ball just with his length. Cam Thomas can go for 40 on any given night or two, it kind of just it varies. And then they have, I've been a Finney Smith truther for a long
Mhm,
time. He's a really fun defender to watch. Really good on-ball defense is some of my favorite stuff to watch
mhm,
in NBA basketball. And that's why I've really been enjoying watching some of the Atlanta Hawks as well, just because of the aforementioned Australian Derek White. But
mhm.
uh, but seeing a couple good point of attack defenders in Finney Smith, Cam Johnson is pretty good. He's got his stretches where he falls asleep a little bit, but then you got a defensive player of the year candidate in Claxton, and then the offensive firepower of Schroeder and Thomas to uh to make every game interesting. They've given a lot of really good teams a run for their money this year.
Mhm.
They hung with the
Hmm.
Cavs, they hung with the Celtics.
Took them to overtime.
Yeah. So they've yeah, they're They're testing a lot of teams, and it makes for really fun basketball. So
Yeah.
big enjoyer.
Yeah.
The like
I
least tankable team.
Yeah.
'Cause those dudes just
yeah.
like aren't gonna quit any game.
No, no. They're
Yeah.
gonna go out and just huck shots and they're just dogs defensively. Even the ones that aren't that good at on-ball defense are just flying around, which is
Yeah.
Hmm.
it's good to see, and it's a nod to their coaching staff too, getting those guys to lock in on that end. It's fun to watch.
Well, my basketball catnip is shooting mechanics, and Cam Johnson has one of the prettiest jumpers in the league. He also grew a beard, and he somehow became a little bit more of a dog with the beard. So you got to love that. Jordan, I find it interesting though that in your rundown of the Brooklyn Nets, you did not happen to mention their highest paid player, I won Benjamin Simmons.
Um, I have enjoyed in the last handful of games not having to watch him.
It's a rough experience. He played at way more than I thought he was going to against the Celtics, and it's just I've never seen a guy lose all of his mojo, like all of it.
It's
It's like in
so
Space
weird.
Jam when the Monstars took everyone's talent. He doesn't want the ball. He doesn't really want to be on the court. He seems okay defensively, but it is wild to watch.
It's really strange. Like we give him a lot of flack and deservedly so, but to think backwards to where he was like 5 years ago
Hmm.
in his all-star caliber year in
All NBA,
Philly.
right?
Yeah,
He was definitely all NBA defense.
third team. I th
Yeah.
I no, I think he was all NBA overall.
Yeah, I think he was a
Um,
third teamer.
yeah. It's it's just shocking to
Yeah.
see because it's not like his game has changed that much. It's kind of sad because I enjoyed watching him when he was because he was a really good defender, especially in his help side.
Yeah.
His passing still shows flashes
Hmm.
Hmm.
of greatness. He had a couple really cool assists the other night. That just like got your attention. It like we said, burning the late night light oil over here, and then you see him whip a no looker past
Yeah.
three defenders to a backdoor cutter, and you're like, oh, okay, Benjamin. Like didn't know you still had that in your bag, but then he passes out of a layup, and it's
Yeah.
and then we revert right back, and I'm like, oh, so sad.
Cam Cam Thomas and Ben Simmons being on the same team is just a gift from the basketball gods because Ben Simmons has no interest in shooting and Cam Thomas has no interest in not shooting. Uh, it's funny that you mention uh, Trey Mann because he's skinny, but he's got some dog in him for sure. Cam Thomas is not a lightweight. That's a thick boy right there.
It's true. He
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 was on
might
that Marcus Smart diet over the summer.
he was bulking up, and he's
He
got
was
I can't remember. He's either number one or number two shot attempts per 100 possessions.
all time.
All
It
yeah
like hit Yeah,
no
it's
yeah
insane.
not
It's
not in the league
insane.
right now.
Yeah,
All
All
time.
time.
forever.
Well, Haley, you mentioned Marcus Smart, and that is a perfect transition to my league pass team, the Memphis Grizzlies. Who, if you've been following our podcast, you know I'm drinking all of the Memphis Grizzlies Kool Aid. I may have drinking way too much Kool Aid and got sick on that Kool Aid because things are not looking as optimistic as I would have liked. A quick rundown of the injury report. So Smart's hurt, Desmond Bane's hurt, Jaws hurt. It's looking a little bleak. Who did I forget? I feel like there's probably someone I'm forgetting.
Gigi's
Yeah,
still out.
He's still
Gigi
out.
hasn't played this season.
Vince
Vince
Williams is
Williams
still
hasn't
out.
played this season, but it's a fun team to watch. I was out on Scottie Pippen Jr. Honestly, when I saw him in the NBA, I was like, this is just like a Bronny James, but the Pippen family version. He's like sixth in the league in assists per game. He's very much like taken the mantle from Tyus Jones is like the league's best backup. Crazy assist to turnover. Such a very heady point guard.
Hmm.
I've liked what I've seen from Zach Edey. He, got into it with Valanciunas the other night, and I love that. I regret not taking him for Rookie of the Year. I think some of my takes will not age too well when the time comes. But one of the biggest things with the Grizzlies is my guy Jay Huff. I've got to
Mm.
shout him out. I didn't look this up, but just based on box scores, he basically scores a point a minute. He scored 12 points in 14 minutes the other night. He played 18 minutes a couple nights ago, scored 20. When he gets in the game, it is going up. And I love it. So shout out to Jay. Got a little bit of a connection to him. So I love to see him doing well in the league, getting a guarantee contract. But I love watching the Grizzlies, even with all their injuries. Such a fun team, even team full of dogs. We love dogs here.
Yeah, and as much as I was hating on the Grizzlies take at the beginning of the year, I do also enjoy watching them, and I will tune into more Grizzlies games once Gigi is back.
Mhm.
Gigi is on my short list of players that I will tune into a game just to watch that player.
Yeah.
And that might be completely unfounded for him, but I've found his rise to mini stardom last year in his injury-ridden role as I mean it was last year, was he a rookie last year?
He was a rookie. It was a
Hmm.
second round pick.
Yeah,
Hmm.
and
Yeah.
just you ta taking a hold of the opportunity he had when everybody went down and really thriving. Big GG enjoyer.
Yeah.
Gigi Jackson's best highlights aren't even on the court. They're his post-game interviews. Like they're amazing.
Yeah. And
He's a really fun player,
Yeah.
but his
yeah, his
interviews are awesome.
he's got a little bit of Cam Thomas in him too, where he's a fan of the shooting. I also love Santi Aldama, only Spanish player in the NBA right now. And long history of Spanish players. So it's kind of crazy that we only have one in the league. It's good to see Brandon Clark back from injury.
Hmm.
Jake Laravia is looking good. One of the more interesting rookies has been Jalen Wells, another Jalen in the league. So if you just naming
Keep him
NBA
coming.
players, just name Jalen, and you've got half the league. But really cool story, kind of like Derek White, started off a D2 school, I believe, and then transferred to I think it was Washington State, and second round pick, and now he's starting for the Grizzlies. Some of it's the injuries to their wings that we talked about, but love seeing him get uh, uh, rotation time. But also, it's worth noting that John Morant is just a highlight factory, so you almost need to turn into it. The game against Brooklyn, John Morant had like
Oh yeah.
three of the most insane highlights. 360 layup is pretty impressive, and he did it twice in the same game. John
The
Morant's such a fun player,
the
and
one
also,
that he cocked back like he was gonna dunk I was watching they had like a top 10 plays of the night, and they had that at number 6, and I was just completely I was like, who put
Who
this
put the
list
somebody needs to
list
together?
fire
together?
This is absolute
fire that
garbage.
person.
No, they definitely had AI make this list, and it's that they clearly didn't watch the clip. They had
Yeah,
his other
That
360 at number 1, and I was like, dude, the
that
the
one
just
wasn't
put
even
them
that good
both.
cockback
comparatively.
dunk. Yeah, you might as well just put them both at number 1.
Yeah, I do want to go on the record that in our first pod, I said that John Morant was an elite level decision maker. I'm pretty sure he's fourth in the league in assists, so I may have gotten one thing right. Um, but yeah, so running out of time, Jordan, DGen Corner, how do we do from last pod, and where are we looking from here?
Well, we're pivoting a little bit going forward just because after recording our pod, we came to find out, and probably should have figured this out beforehand, that you can't make a parlay bet on games that are on separate days just because they haven't released the money line lines for the individual games in advance. You have to do them day of. So we put our bets on each of the games individually and essentially broke even for our first 2 weeks, which is great. Uh we hit six of our first eight picks, which was fantastic.
Nice.
And then going forward, what we're going to do is we've picked out a day during each of the 2 weeks between podcasts that there's a lot of games going on, and we each pick one game for that day. So that day of, we can submit all of our picks on one ticket and see if we can bring home some shmoney. So for the next 2 weeks, our picks are going to be on the two Wednesdays. So Wednesday the 13th, Wednesday the 20th. This week on Wednesday, I'm picking the Wolves over the Blazers. Josh has the Phoenix Suns beating the Sacramento Kings. Haley's got the Cavs over the 76ers. And Nick has is it the Thunder over the Pelicans? And
Yeah.
then next week on the
Easy
20th,
money.
easy money. You might as well just give it to us now. Next week on the 20th, I've got the Rockets over the Pacers.
Mm.
Josh has the Phoenix Suns over the New York Knicks. Haley's got the Thunder over the Blazers, and Nick's got the Cavs over the Pelicans. Nick just is beaten up on the Pelicans, and probably for good reason. I mean, I think with the comments that we made at the beginning of the year about their lack of cohesiveness, and then combine that with Zion appearing like maybe once every other game, DeJounte's out. It's a tough
It's
scene over
funny though,
there.
it's coming from Nick because he's the one who said
He's the
that
one
the
who's
Pels are
drinking the
The
going to make the
Kool-Aid.
overs.
playoffs. And
Yep.
now he's like, they're going to lose every game.
Just throwing shade at Nick, and he's not here.
Rip.
All righty. We will see how we do. Hopefully, hopefully we'll nice 8-0
Oh,
run
I
would be
believe.
nice. I have faith. I have faith. All right, fellas. Well, this has been fun. This has been another edition of the Uninsured Ankles podcast. We will be back in your feeds in a couple weeks. Don't forget to like, subscribe, follow, comment, retweet, do all the things that social media wants you to do. We have the NBA Cup coming up soon, so we'll have some reactions to that. Will LeBron go 2-0 in NBA Cup history? That would put him two more NBA Cups than Jordan if we're keeping track of GOAT status. So we'll see. We'll be back with some reactions to then. Until then, keep your friends tight and your ankle braces even tighter. Good night, y'all.